Welcome back to SN Studios. In today's video, we're diving into an intriguing story from Bradford involving the Daniels brothers. If you're a fan of captivating tales, you're not going to want to miss this one. The Daniels brothers were no ordinary figures in Bradford. They were infamous mobsters, highly respected and widely known across the city. Leading the family was Javis Daniels, often referred to by his notorious nickname, Judd. His reputation alone was enough to command respect, but there's a lot more to their story. First, let's focus on Johnny Daniels, the youngest and arguably one of the most dangerous of the Daniels brothers. In his day, Johnny was a notorious figure in Bradford's underworld. Feared for his temper and quick to draw a gun, he wasn't someone to cross lightly. He built a reputation through drug dealing, armed robbery and extortion, carving out his place as a key player in Bradford's criminal scene. But his story doesn't stop at his reputation. His involvement in one of the city's most gruesome murders would cement his name in Bradford's history. In 2009, Johnny Daniels and 3 others were sentenced to a combined total of 84 years for their roles in the chilling abduction, torture, and murder of businessman Teddy Simpson. Simpson, a 56-year-old father of 4, became the target of a robbery gone horribly wrong. The gang, led by Johnny and his associate Anthony Davies, believed Simpson had access to over £250,000 in cash and drugs. That night, what started as a planned robbery escalated into a brutal act of violence. Johnny Daniels played a crucial role in the planning stages. He supplied the gang with key details about Simpson's home, where he lived, where he might keep the money, and even directed them to the best time to strike. This was no small-time robbery. This was a high-stakes operation. On August 1st, 2007, armed with an imitation gun and a wrench, Johnny and his gang broke into Simpson's house on Sticker Lane in Bradford. The moment they entered, chaos erupted. Simpson was struck down almost immediately, with blows landing in the hallway, bringing him to his knees. The gang attacked him relentlessly. Anything they could get their hands on became a weapon, including a frying pan used in the frenzied assault. Teddy Simpson, already badly injured and bleeding, was dragged into his lounge, where the gang employed a particularly cruel form of torture. They placed a wet cushion cover over his head in a technique similar to waterboarding, leaving him gasping for air as they continued to beat him senseless. But their violence didn't stop with Simpson. When his friend, Gary Folkard, arrived at the house, he too was viciously attacked. The gang didn't stop with the beating. After savagely assaulting Simpson and Folkard, Johnny, along with accomplices Errol Witter and Robert Cameron, abducted Simpson, leaving the scene with their severely injured victim. The next morning, Simpson's body was discovered in the grounds of a former nursing home on Huddersfield Road in Wyke. His hands were bound, and he was stripped to nothing but his underwear and socks. The injuries were shocking, his facial bones shattered, his ribs and shoulder blades broken. Yet the judge noted in court that the gang didn't intend to kill Simpson. They wanted him to suffer, to break him down, but they had gone too far. In court, none of the gang members showed a shred of remorse. Anthony Davies, who was described by the judge as a man who thrived on violence and took pride in his physical dominance, was sentenced to at least 35 years behind bars. His subordinate, Darren Martin, received 24 years. Both men would be spending the better part of their lives in prison. As for Johnny Daniels, he was handed a 13-year sentence for his role as the organizer of the robbery. The court recognized him as the brains behind the operation, the one who orchestrated the raid and directed the gang's moves. However, Johnny's story didn't end with that brutal crime. In 2010, just a year after his sentencing, Johnny found himself in more legal trouble. This time, he was charged with money laundering and for providing unlicensed security personnel on construction sites. These offences were just another layer in Johnny's criminal empire. He was deeply embedded in the illegal workings of Bradford's underworld. And it wasn't just small sums of money we're talking about. By 2011, during a confiscation hearing, it was revealed that Johnny Daniels had profited over £1 million through criminal activities. The court ordered him to forfeit £500,000 in assets, including properties in Bradford, or face further jail time. The judge made it clear that Johnny had 6 months to comply or risk an additional 3.5 years in prison. But even before his arrest for the Simpson case, Johnny's name was linked to other violent crimes. In August 2007, rumours circulated that Johnny was the gunman responsible for shooting Bradford mobster Maggie Khan at his girlfriend's home in Dobkiln Lane, Bingley. The shooting left Maggie Khan with life-threatening injuries, including a perforated colon and a lacerated liver. Though Johnny was never officially charged with the shooting, the whispers in Bradford's criminal circles only added to his already infamous reputation. Next, we turn our attention to another key figure in the Daniels family criminal empire, Mark Davy. While Johnny Daniels may have made his mark through violence and armed robbery, Mark took a different route. He was the brains behind the family's drug operations, a money man who built his reputation as a powerful drug baron. His rise to the top of Bradford's drug trade was anything but subtle. Mark Davy first found himself behind bars in 2001, when he was handed an 8-year prison sentence for supplying large quantities of cocaine. Even early on, it was clear that Mark wasn't dealing with small-time operations. He was moving serious weight across Bradford, fueling the city's drug market. But prison time wasn't enough to keep him out of the game. In fact, it seems his time behind bars only solidified his role as a major player. By 2010, Mark was back in the headlines, this time sentenced to 12 years for leading a drug gang that ferried cocaine wholesale across the Pennines into Bradford. The operation was sophisticated, involving large quantities of drugs and a vast network that spanned across counties. Mark was also ordered to pay more than £130,000 from the profits he made, ill-gotten gains from his criminal enterprise. But that was just the tip of the iceberg for Davy. Fast forward to 2020, and Mark Davy was once again the head of a large-scale drug gang, this time running an empire that supplied both cocaine and heroin across the north of England. The Yorkshire-based operation had its tentacles in West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, Lancashire and Humberside, flooding communities with dangerous narcotics. Over a 2-year investigation, West Yorkshire Police's Precision, Serious and Organised Crime Unit unravelled the massive operation, leading to the arrest of 9 individuals, all linked to Mark Davy. At the centre of the operation was Davy himself, along with his partner, Charlotte Brannan. In May 2018, Brannan was caught red-handed, stopped by police on the M62 near Gildersham with a kilogram of high-purity cocaine, estimated to be worth £70,000 on the streets, hidden in her car. This was only the beginning. When police searched Brannan's house in Cleckheaton, they uncovered another kilogram of high-purity heroin and over £26,000 in cash. Clear evidence of the scale of their operation. It's believed Brannan was on her way to meet Robert Clark in Scarborough, another key player in the network. Clark was arrested later that day with over £160,000 in cash found at his home. The gang was making huge profits, and their reach was extensive. But the police weren't done. Just 2 months later, in July 2018, Mark Davy continued to push his operation forward. Along with Michael Wilson, he arranged the delivery of a kilogram of vacuum-packed cannabis skunk to Sean Smith, a drug runner from Hull. Things took a dangerous turn when police attempted to stop Smith after he collected the drugs. In a desperate attempt to escape, Smith drove the wrong way, up the M62 slip road at Chain Bar roundabout, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision with a motorcyclist. He eventually ditched the car at Hartshead Moor Services, abandoning the drugs and fleeing the scene. Smith was later caught on CCTV arranging a taxi with Davy to make his escape back to Hull. It was clear that Davy's operation wasn't just sophisticated, it was reckless and dangerous. The police operation that took down Mark Davy's drug empire was a major victory. Detective Chief Inspector Mark Walker, who led the investigation, made it clear how much damage the gang's drug dealings had caused in the region. The harm caused to individuals and communities as a result of drug dealing cannot be overstated, Walker said. This is not a victimless crime. The gang's operation was dismantled, and 9 individuals were jailed for a combined total of 40 years. The message from the authorities was clear. Those profiting from this illegal trade would face the full force of the law. Mark Davy, living on Maple Avenue in Bradford, was sentenced to 10.5 years for conspiracy to supply heroin, cocaine and cannabis. His partner, Charlotte Brannan, received 7 years for her role in the operation, as well as possession of a prohibited weapon. Others involved in the conspiracy, like Robert Clark and Jamie Sherlock, were sentenced to 9 and 7 years respectively, while smaller players like Michael Wilson and Sean Smith received shorter sentences, including suspended sentences for their roles in the cannabis distribution. Davy's influence and control over the drug trade in Yorkshire left a long-lasting impact. Even after years in prison, his name still carries weight. As of today, Mark Davy is still serving his sentence, locked away for his crimes, but the ripple effect of his drug empire continues to be felt across the region. His story is a stark reminder of the reach and power that drug barons can have, and the devastation they can cause to communities. The Daniels brothers each carved out their own criminal legacy, and Mark Davies was one built on money, drugs, and the manipulation of people. His downfall was inevitable, but not before he left his mark on Bradford's underworld. Now let's talk about the third Daniels brother, Dicky Daniels. Unlike Johnny's violent reputation or Mark's role as a drug kingpin, Dicky Daniels was known as a respected figure in Bradford, though his respect came from his deep involvement in the city's criminal underworld. He was a well-known and influential man in the area, with a criminal career that would eventually land him behind bars. In 2008, Dicky Daniels was jailed for his role in a conspiracy to smuggle large quantities of cocaine and cannabis into West Yorkshire, a plan valued at a staggering £200,000. This wasn't a small-time operation. Dicky was a part of an organised gang, with links stretching far beyond Bradford, even outside of the UK. The gang had ties with drug barons, and their reach extended across regions. But despite their complex operation, the ring was smashed after a 10-month police investigation involving covert surveillance. At the time of his arrest, Dicky Daniels lived on Beechwood Road in Wibsey, a quiet street that masked the scale of his involvement in the drug trade. He was handed a 10-year sentence for conspiring to supply cocaine, but he wasn't the only one to face justice. His associate, Anthony Davies of Lloyd's Drive, Low Moor, was sentenced to 6 years after pleading guilty to conspiracy charges as well. Together, they had been moving large amounts of cocaine, playing key roles in a much bigger operation. The court revealed that much of the evidence used to bring the gang down came from surveillance on the mastermind behind the operation, John Rowe. Rowe, who was based in Workington, Cumbria, was responsible for organising major drug pickups, including one significant haul of imported cocaine and cannabis valued at £29,000. Police had Rowe under watch for months, tracking his movements from Bradford to London, where he would collect and transport drugs back to Yorkshire. His conversations were secretly recorded, and this surveillance became a crucial part of the prosecution's case against the gang. Rowe, seen as the architect of the conspiracy, was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his role. One of the more surprising figures involved in this conspiracy was Brian Mounsey, a man with a shocking past. Mounsey, from Stockton-on-Tees, had once been sentenced to death in Thailand for drug trafficking. His death sentence was later commuted to 40 years in a Thai prison before he managed to return to the UK. Despite his dangerous past, Mounsey found himself embroiled in yet another drug conspiracy and was jailed for 10 years alongside Dicky Daniels. The network they were part of stretched across the UK, with international connections making it a highly sophisticated operation. While the rest of the gang had their day in court, Dicky's story came to a sad end a few years later. After serving part of his sentence, Dicky Daniels passed away, leaving behind a complicated legacy. He was a man who commanded respect in Bradford, but much of that respect came from his involvement in the underworld. Now we move on to the last two brothers in the Daniels family, Raymond and Javis Daniels. These two brothers shared the same parents, unlike the others, and their heritage was a mix of Irish and Pakistani roots. In Bradford, they were both well respected and held significant influence. Their unique backgrounds and strong family ties connected them deeply to the city's underworld. First, let's take a look at Raymond Daniels, who was a serious name in Bradford in his day, known for his connections and loyalty. Raymond's story took a dark turn in June 2007 when his close friend Jimmy Fletcher, an amateur boxer, was attacked. Jimmy Fletcher was shot at his flat in Olmerwood, Bradford, in a revenge plot orchestrated by none other than Maggie Khan, a cousin of the Daniels brothers. The hit was put in place after Jimmy had knocked Maggie out in a brawl at a club, a defeat that Maggie wasn't willing to let slide. The hitmen Maggie hired were two young Asian males, one of whom was known as Raz or Rash. On the night of the attack, one of the hitmen held a gun to Jimmy's head and pulled the trigger, but fate intervened. The gun jammed. In that moment of chaos, Jimmy fought back, punching one of the assailants and trying to wrestle the weapon away. However, the other gunman managed to shoot him in the leg before fleeing the scene. Jimmy survived, but the incident intensified the already simmering tensions between the Daniels brothers and Maggie Khan. By August 2007, the feud had reached a boiling point. Raymond, along with Jimmy and Christopher Fletcher, Jimmy's uncle, plotted to strike back. The plan was to target Maggie Khan directly. On a fateful night, a gunman shot Maggie in the abdomen at his girlfriend's home on Dobkiln Lane in Bingley. The wound was serious. Maggie suffered a perforated colon and a lacerated liver. Rumour had it that Johnny Daniels, Raymond's brother, was the one who pulled the trigger, but nothing was ever proven. At the same time, Raymond Daniels was facing his own set of legal troubles. He fled to Marbella, Spain, going on the run as the authorities continued their investigations. Despite the violent feud with Maggie, Raymond and Maggie were entangled in a separate case that dated back to 2006. Raymond and Maggie were dealing with a major charge: conspiracy to supply £750,000 worth of cocaine. It was a high-profile case that could have led to lengthy prison sentences, but after a thorough trial, the charges were dropped, and no further action was taken. This close call was yet another twist in Raymond's tumultuous life. Interestingly, despite the animosity between Maggie and the Daniels brothers, there was once a time when they were all close. Maggie was more than just a rival. He was family. As it turns out, Javis and Raymond's father and Maggie's father were cousins, meaning Maggie was not only a close associate, but also a blood. Their relationship, however, began to crumble after Jimmy Fletcher's fight with Maggie. Raymond's loyalty to Jimmy drove a wedge between him and Maggie, and the feud between them ultimately led to violence and mistrust. Today, Raymond Daniels has put his criminal past behind him and is now a businessman. And now we come to the last brother in our story, the main man himself, Javis Daniels, also known as Judd. Javis wasn't just the eldest of the Daniels brothers. He was the one everyone looked up to, the man whose name held serious weight in Bradford and beyond. Known for his sharp instincts and ruthless nature, Javis Daniels was both feared and respected, a true heavyweight in the criminal world. His reputation as one of the biggest names to come out of Bradford was well earned, and his connections ran deep. Javis had strong ties with the travelling community, which extended across the UK and even into Ireland. His network was vast, linking him up with influential figures from various regions. His reach wasn't just local. Javis Daniels had alliances and associates that stretched across the country. Even the late boxer Maruf, a respected figure in his own right, held Javis in high regard. Javis's family ties also added to his power. He was closely connected to his mobster cousins from Burnley, Rocky and Fiaz Khan. These two were known as serious figures in their day, highly respected and deeply embedded within the travelling community. They ran the doors in Manchester back in the 90s, and like Javis, they were connected to the underworld in Ireland. Rocky and Fiaz were men not to be messed with, and together with Javis, they made a formidable trio that commanded respect wherever they went. But Javis wasn't just a man of connections. He was also a fighter. Literally. Known for his bare-knuckle fighting skills, Javis never backed down from a challenge. He could throw his fists with the best of them, and his reputation as a scrapper made him both feared and admired. One story that highlights his fearsome presence involves Huggy Osman, a well-known figure in Bradford back in the day, who refused to go toe-to-toe with Javis in a one-on-one fight. That's the level of respect and fear he inspired. It was also said that whenever the Daniels brothers had a problem, it was Javis who would step in to sort things out. He was known for being the family's fixer, the one who could handle any situation with a firm hand. People in the community would often call on him to resolve disputes, knowing he had both the connections and the muscle to get things done. Javis Daniels was the type of man who could control a room with just his presence, and he commanded a level of respect that few others could match. Sadly, Javis Daniels passed away in 2010 from natural causes. His death marked the end of an era for Bradford's underworld. The legacy of the Daniels brothers lives on. But it was Javis who stood as the pillar of the family, a man whose name still echoes in the streets of Bradford and beyond. Thanks for tuning into SN Studios for this deep dive into the Daniels brothers, one of Bradford's most notorious families. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth looks into the lives of some of the most influential figures in criminal history.